All right, so it's recording, and then we'll do a 3, 2, 1, go. So 3, 2, 1. Hey there, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on the Growth Secrets interview series. I'm here with David Baxter. David and I have had a really good conversation already before we hit the record button, because he, like me, has been he's a virtual business owner, essentially, right? His business has been operating remotely for a number of years now. So we're going to talk about his business. We're going to talk about what he's doing during this COVID-19 shutdown to keep his business going and to keep his client projects moving forward. So I'm really excited to have this conversation today. So David, thank you so much for joining me.
Sure, it's great to be here.
Awesome. Well, would you do me a favor and just tell everybody watching here today? Oh, and by the way, guys, if you're watching this live, do me a favor and leave a comment that says live. If you're watching the replay, just leave a comment later on that says replay. It helps us understand when the best time to do these would be. But yeah, David, if you could just let everybody know a little bit about yourself and about your business and what you do to help people.
Sure. So I run Big Pixel, which is a custom software company that we focus on helping startups and businesses with ideas and making them happen. So generally, we come in, people have a problem, something they want to solve, whether it's a brand new idea for a startup, an entrepreneur, or it's an existing company that wants to do something new. We build from what we call whole cloth, which means we don't need a spec or anything. We design the spec, we build it, we do the whole thing and then go live and support it. So we focus on that, and we work with really big companies all the way to brand new ones. We started out, we're just over 7 years old now, and my passion has been working with startups for a long time. And so we've helped build 20-something startups, worked in some capacity for 20-something startups. And we focus, helping them get to revenue really quickly, helping them to get off the ground, kind of turn into almost a consulting firm for them. Because a lot of these guys, they're not technically savvy at all. They have an idea, they don't know what that means. And so we help them, what is customer discovery? What is your monetization strategy? What do we build now? What do we build later? So we do all of that. And then we take that same kind of concept and turn it into larger companies, because they're in the same boat. They just have more money. But they have ideas that they want to take their company in, but they don't know how to do that. So we can apply those same chops to larger companies. So that's generally what we do. But yeah, we love doing it. It's a lot of fun.
That's great. Yeah, I think you and I and our industries, right, or our specialties, at least from my perspective, we've worked, it seems, adjacently, right? I'm a marketing guy, and you're a developer guy, if we're going to put ourselves into probably two broad and unfair buckets. So I feel like I speak your language, not quite conversationally, certainly not fluently, but it's really interesting to me how you take that vision from a client, right, and turn it into something that's real and tangible that works, right? I think there's what's in the client's head of what they want, and then there's the role for you as the consultant, which is, okay, let's take that idea, turn it into something real, and actually make it into something that can work for your business. So I think that's really great. So let's talk for a second about, what's going on in the world right now. Everybody knows it. Everybody is aware of this. And we're talking, of course, about this are in place, quarantine, coronavirus, social distancing, whatever you want to call it. We're all now in the position of most of us anyway, and certainly the majority of the folks who are watching this are having to change the way that they're doing business. What are some of the things that you're doing to keep your company, whether that's keeping it afloat or keeping it moving forward, or are you being expansive and looking to take advantage of the opportunity that always exists in a crisis? So what are you guys doing differently these days?
Well, so for us, we were blessed enough right before all this started. We had just brought on some very large clients, for us at least, large clients for us. And so we started a big hiring spree in the last month. And it's very strange for us, because we know that the world has changed, but we're busier than ever. We hired 3 people in the last 6 weeks, and we're ramping them up and getting them going. And so we're heads down when it comes to a work position, pretty heavily. And so that's just a huge blessing. But at the same time, when I look back as the business owner and I look at the pipeline, that's dried up largely, right? I mean, we had, half a dozen projects that we were either have a verbal on, or we have really good interest in with the client, and they're very excited, and they're kind of like vanished. And I know they'll come back, but they're scared, right? I mean, these are service companies who are, engineering firms and startups and things like that their business just got kicked in the face. And so they're like, this is a really important thing, but we're going to hold. And so that's scary to me, right? You've got the pipeline is dried up. Now we're very busy for the next 6, 8 months, year. So we should be okay to last that. But I totally understand if you didn't, if you weren't in the position where you were really, really, really busy, and those clients, like one of our big clients is in the medical field, so they're fine. And the other one is a self-funded startup, so he's fine. But if you didn't have that, I mean, we would be in a really tight pickle. And so we're very sensitive to that. And it's even weird, like when you even do a reach out, it's like, how do you be sensitive to the fact that whoever you're reaching out to, their business is in a flux, right? They're in a weird spot. And I don't know, we're figuring that out just like everybody else. It's like when you do a cold call or when you do a LinkedIn reach out, how do you make that not sound horribly callous, right? So we're trying to figure that stuff out. And that's been we're tiptoeing. The first thing I mention whenever I reach out to an existing client or trying to follow up with one of those people in the pipeline, I'm like, hey, how are you? Are you okay? How is everything? And then I might mention a sentence, hey, do you have any work? it's a weird thing. So we're trying to figure that out. You want to be sensitive because everyone's working from home now, but a lot of people are really struggling. And so we want to be sensitive to that. But we've been very blessed. And again, we've been working remotely. So from our day to day, not much has changed. Our clients have changed, our big corporate clients in particular. They have 90, 100 people sitting in their office, and now they're suddenly scattered to the winds. And that's a huge deal for a big company. And so we have to be very patient with them because they can't get back to us the way they normally do, lickety split. Oh, we need this answered. They're like, right, man, I haven't talked to my marketing guy in a week. I have no idea what you're talking about. Right. So yeah, it's an adjustment for sure.
Well, look, I'm totally with you on a lot of those cases because all of my clients are all of a sudden, if they were working in a physical office, some of mine weren't, right? So there was minimal disruption there. But yeah, some of them, it's all of a sudden everyone's spread out and you got to figure out how to communicate with people. We've been, and again, these are tools that I've used a ton before, but I've helped a lot of my clients start using them now, using tools like Slack and certainly Zoom. I heard the other day, Zoom went from 10 million monthly active users in December, which is a great business, good for them, to over 200 million. Like between December and March, probably 185 million of those came in March, right? So implementing some of these tools, but you make a really good point, David, about, being sensitive in your outreaches and in your marketing and your sales conversations. I've struggled with this. I've just tried to be very transparent and very, just very open about it and just calling it out, saying, hey, look, I know it's a difficult time. So forgive me for being, I guess, forward or I don't, and I'll just say, like, I don't mean to overlook what I'm sure is a difficult time, but then I present, what I see as potentially the opportunity here. And that's in my business, that happens to be what I'm doing, is I'm helping businesses grow. And I think there is an opportunity for that, but just having that empathy is the best that I can come up with, right? Like, there's no playbook for this, right?
There's no playbook. So, and what's interesting, so some of our clients are international, and what I find very interesting, funny, I'm not sure, but I don't care where you're talking. It's the first time ever, probably in human existence, we all have something to talk about. We
Yes.
all
Yeah.
are in the same boat. I don't care. I mean, our guys are in Europe, and I'm like, hey, how is it there? What's going on? And they're like, yeah, we can't leave our house either. This is crazy. It's the first time ever. I don't care where you are. My family's in Dallas, and no matter where you are, this isn't regional. This isn't local. This is worldwide. And
Yes.
so it does give you an in, right? One of the classic marketing things when you're reaching out like on LinkedIn or a cold thing is to come up with something you have in common. Well, right now that's the easiest literally it ever has been.
Yeah.
But if you do that wrong, you play that card wrong, you're going to look like a jerk. And so what
Yeah.
we've been doing when we reach out or when I've been reaching out is I'll tell them an anecdote in my life, something changes that's lighthearted, but it's because of the corona, right? This is something weird that we're going through. How are you? That kind of stuff. That's kind of my icebreaker in this weird world. Talk about a dog or whatever. It's something weird, funny, but if something you can relate to. It's corona related. We're all in this boat together, and then I can do my sales pitch. But it is hard because yeah, there is no playbook here. No one's ever done this before, ever. I mean, even if you include the Spanish flu 100 years ago, the totally different planet than where we live now. So it's just, and it's worldwide. I mean, Spanish flu, you couldn't communicate like you can now. So it's always very different. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I asked the question the other day, could you imagine if this happened in 1988, right? Or
Hmm.
1993, before the internet made so much of what we're doing right now possible. I mean, you might be looking instead of that, what say, you know, I think right now they say like 80% of businesses are affected by this, but you'd be looking at a 100% of businesses being affected by
Yeah.
this, except maybe the guy who takes 4 months to build a chair and sells it for a lot of money, right? But there's not a
Yeah, I
lot of
mean, we were
businesses
talking
like
about that
that.
with my kids because they're denizens of the internet age. Everything pre-internet and pre-cell phone is the Stone Age to them. And I'm like, in the 90s, even the early 2000s, Zoom we didn't have the tech. Yeah, you had Skype, kind of, sort of, but you might be able to talk to one person because that's all your internet could hold.
Right.
There was no real communication tools except for like Google Chat, Google Hangout, which was a one-to-one conversation. I mean, I know now my job didn't exist like it does now, but yeah, the idea that everyone is working from home or can work from home, that's such a blessing that people just don't realize. I mean,
Yeah,
even
totally
10 years
agree.
ago, we would not have been able to do what we're doing now because, I mean, this conversation we're having now on Zoom, that technology, that bandwidth even did not exist. We couldn't be doing this simple thing we're doing right now 10 years ago. You still had a cell phone, but you didn't have gigabit internet into your house. Um, my kids are
Right.
watching Netflix and who knows what upstairs and, using internet by the truckload, and we're still having this conversation. That was not possible just a few years ago.
Yeah.
And everyone worked in an office 10 years ago. I mean, very, very few people work from home. That was a crazy thing um, to do. And now that's pretty common, and we have tools to support it. It's great. It could be much, much worse, I think is important to keep in mind.
Yeah, and that's and I know, and this is what I have to keep making this disclaimer, right? Like, we're not overlooking the deep challenges that a lot of people are facing, but
Mhm.
it doesn't do anyone any good to just say, well, this is the worst thing ever and it's the end of the world and we
Sure.
should just not try, right? So at the risk of appearing callous, we have to push forward, and that's what I've been preaching to everybody, because you're going to come out of this. We're going to get out of this. This is the
Mhm.
other silver lining, right? This isn't going to last forever. Worst case, there's a herd immunity that's developed now. That the hope there's a better and quicker and less costly way, like in terms of health and lives, right? But at worst case, it will be over and we will come out of this. And your business, and we're talking to business leaders in this interview series, this podcast, right? Your business is either going to be in a better place afterwards or a
Mhm.
worse place,
Mhm.
right? It's not going to be anywhere in between. There is no such thing. We don't all just get to press pause and then pick up where things left off.
Yeah.
So as a business leader, it's your responsibility to try to make it better, or at least keep it from getting much worse. And so we have to push forward. So that's what I've been telling folks, and I hope that doesn't sound callous. It is what it is, right? It's I consider that to be pragmatic. So so yeah, I mean, I guess that is a good opportunity to transition over, or not even transition, but to really look deeper into that. So you and I having this experience and working remotely, let's give some practical experiential knowledge here. What are the tools that you guys use to communicate with your own internal team and to communicate with your client, to manage projects, all of those things that other people might be able to adopt?
Sure. So internally, we live and die by Slack. We've tried the other ones. Slack there's a certain balance that I really like about Slack, which is, it's friendly and it's professional. If you go to Microsoft Teams, which is great for corporate users, I found most of our bigger clients are using that because it's free basically, but it's missing some of that. It's just pure business, and I love the playfulness of Slack and channels and all of that. And I think
Yeah.
Teams is great, but if you've been using Slack, it's a really weird transition because they do things they're doing the same thing in a very different way. But so we live and die by Slack, and we use Zoom all day, where we just, you can chat on Slack, but at some point you need some human to human contact, where a Slack message, is just like a text. You can't tell if someone's mad at you over Slack, and you can't, I mean, we're doing development, so development is inherently difficult stuff. And we have complicated problems that we're going to get lost in a text translation. So we live on Zoom to do that. And then the clients, typically we contact them still through email. Some of our clients want to be on Slack, and so we do that. But I find that my best advice when you're doing remote is not to force the situation. I've learned that the hard way. Like some clients, they're not going to use another tool. You're an older gentleman or older lady, that email is how you've done business for 20 years. You're not going to suddenly change because some upstart thinks you should use Slack. And you, as the business owner or the project manager or whatever, need to be okay with that. So we have clients who just email us to death, and we just, cool, we log it in and we take it into our internal processes and manage it. Some guys are like, hey, we'll Slack with you. It's great. Some of our guys, we even text, which is strange, but it happens. That's almost too personal to me on some level. But you've got to be flexible. And when you're in a remote environment, it's not ideal. The dogs are going to bark. The kids are going to wander in, and you have to be flexible to that, even if you're talking to a CEO, right? You can't be embarrassed by that. But I think,
Well, because their dog's barking too.
What's that?
Because their dog's barking in the
Their
background
dog's
too.
barking too. That's right, and that's okay. In this environment, that's okay. Now, after this, if you're still remaining remote, that there's not as much leeway. But there's my dog now. I think that's the key part. And then you have to have something. We're actually playing with a new app. We just started playing with it yesterday. We've been using Jira, which is granddaddy of software management, project management tools. I'm not a fan of Jira. It's overly complicated to me. My project manager likes it, but we just started playing with this thing called ClickUp, which is kind of this Jira tool, which is pretty friendly. It's kind of got that Slack friendliness to it, and that's been working pretty well for us recently. But I think regardless of what, you need some sort of tool that keeps you on track. And Slack doesn't do that. That's a communication tool. I think a lot of people think that it can be that, but it's not. At some point you make a decision, and then that has to go somewhere. Right. That's something that remote workers, I think, sometimes have a problem with is, we had this conversation. Okay, great. But now there's an action item. That action item has to live somewhere. It's going to get forgotten. So pick a tool for that. So that, to me, regardless of your business, you need a communication tool, a video tool, and a management tool. So that keeps you on track and that you don't forget things.
Yeah.
I think those are the three main tools, whichever one you want to check off. I think you need those concepts. Or you're gonna struggle mightily with remote.
Well, that's really great. I mean, so that gives you guys, if you're watching this and you're taking notes, those are really important things there. You need those three things to run a remote, either just to do your job remotely or to run a business remotely. I think that's good. So video tool, you said a communication tool, and then a management tool. I think I've had those without really thinking about it like that, right? Because it was, there came a time when I needed to have a video call. So I found Zoom, right? And there came a time when my projects list became too big. Either I never was managed in my head, but in Evernote, it became too expansive to just use Evernote notes or something. And found Asana, which is the project management tool I use. And then communication became too complex and I guess there was too much of a requirement for contextual understanding of the conversation for email to handle. And then came Slack, right? So going into it saying, hey, trust me, guys, you're going to need these three things, I think is really helpful to people. So thanks for that. That's good.
Sure.
So you mentioned something else I didn't want to, I was going to say this, that an interesting thing you mentioned, that we all have something to talk about now. Well, I think with that same, along those same lines, we're all giving each other this collective break, I think, meaning that the dog's barking in the background, we're all experiencing it.
Yeah.
Like the kids, you will, during this interview, I promise, you will hear one of my kids screaming downstairs, right? Because big brother or little brother pulled big brother's hair, or big brother pushed little brother down. But everybody's dealing with that. And I think it's a neat thing. It is an interesting thing. It's like one of those, gives faith in humanity things again, where everyone's totally get it. My kids are in the background, or my dog's barking, or we've got this going on at our house too. And so that's been neat to see. So that's just kind of an observation from my perspective.
Yeah, I think it's
I'm sure you've seen the same.
You've seen those I'm a comic book superhero fan. One of the things back a long time ago when they invented Deadpool, I guess it was in the 80s or something, the thing that he did was he broke the fourth wall. I mean, he talks to the audience directly. And that had never been done in comics, or at least not in any mainstream way. But it opened something unique. And I think that this environment now, we're breaking a bit of the fourth wall. Normally that personal stuff, you might know your client is married, you might know your client has kids, you might know they have a dog, but it's all over there. And now we're all in, it's over, it's right next to you. My dog's about to go on a walk, he's freaking out, that's what you're hearing. And that's something that I normally would never hear from a client, because they're buttoned up and and they're professionals, and we don't cross business and personal, and that's fine. That's how business has been done forever. But now you don't have a choice. So that fourth wall is almost breaking. You're getting into that, and you're hearing more anecdotes where it's funny, because a client who you didn't even know had children is now talking about their teenage daughter, and because of whatever, because we're all stuck together.
Because they're doing digital learning behind them.
That's right. Yeah, they're doing their high school stuff in the background, and you can't separate that anymore. And I think if we play that right, it can deepen those relationships, right? The more you know about your clients, the better you're going to be. One of our big tenets for my company is we want to build relationship with our clients. We don't want to be transactional. Because our business is very project driven. We don't really have recurring revenue. It's just not our thing. And so to us, a recurring client is one that keeps coming back. And the way that works is purely relational. If in a relational business model is, to me, a lot more resilient, because if a competitor comes in, it's development, there's 8 billion developers everywhere. They're everywhere. And so if I'm just providing a service, check the box, I'm building you some code, then you can go find another one, probably cheaper than me. But if I'm building you something unique and that relationship gets built, then that becomes a lot harder to replace. And I think that's for us, we live and die by referrals. We're almost completely referral based. And that relational thing, I think no matter what you're selling, even if you're selling a widget that everyone is selling, that relational model can only strengthen you. And I think in today's world, you've got some advantages there, because now that relationship can be deepened because you're in this weird shared experience. And so I think you can not use it to your advantage. That sounds very callous, but you can deepen those relationships and build better client base.
Okay, so now you're really touching on something that I think is it's it's critical for businesses, just as we were talking about, you're either going to come out of this better or worse,
Mm-hmm.
is making yourself too valuable to cut, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're right. There's always somebody who will do it cheaper.
Yeah.
And if all you do is maybe you have a better relationship with your client than the guy who can do it cheaper, well, in times of economic strain, the value of that relationship you have with them is going to be tested at least,
Mm-hmm.
right? So yes, the relationship is important, but you need to make sure that you're bringing that's a value-based relationship,
Sure.
not because you're buddies, right? If
Yeah.
you're bringing value, where the difference between you and the cheaper guy is so clear that you wouldn't dare cut that part out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And making it clear that what you're paying for, Mr. Client, is this additional value, then you can be a little bit more secure at the very least during these tough times. So that's a really good piece of advice there, David.
I think the intangibles are going to be huge. And I think the other thing is, I mean, I don't see this as callous. I see it as looking on the bright side. We are going to
Yep.
come out of this. And
Yep.
the weird thing about this that's going to be so unique compared to any other crisis, right? Like if you go back to 2008, right, we had the big Great Recession is the official name
Mm-hmm.
for it. And I'm sure they'll come up with some cute name for this one. But
Yeah,
that was an economic problem, right? And so it was extremely brutal and it was very slow to come back. I think what's going to be, and this is just conjecture, but I think what's going to be unique about this is it dropped fast, but I believe it's going to come up pretty quickly because there's a lot of pent up demand right now, right? Especially if you're on the consumer side. If your business is focused on the consumer side, there's a ton of people who just want to get out. So they want to be entertained. They want to go and do stuff. They want to buy things because right now you think about it, we're not spending very much money compared to what we usually do. People aren't going out to eat. You can't really buy anything except groceries. So there is some pent up, even economic, stuff. There's some savings happening that people are going to spend. And so if your business is in the right kind, the right place, even if you're B2B, like you have an engineering firm, they're in huddle mode, but eventually they're going to feel comfortable and they're going to blow it out. And I think if you can gear your business up in that direction, I think you can really capitalize and grow. And again, it's not taking advantage of a situation. It's looking on the bright side and for using this time now, if you can. If you're in survival mode, then survive. Right? That's different. But if you're a marketing company or a services company, you can think about how can I provide this new value when they have more money when they're coming back. Because I think when they do come back, they're going to open those purse strings pretty big because it's pent up, things they need that they couldn't buy for a long time.
I agree. So the lesson there is keep your pipeline full. I think that's what you're saying is that with this pent up demand, and I know a lot of my clients who are not necessarily directly affected by this, they're still being a little more conservative because there's a whole lot of unknown, right? One of them being how long will this thing last? And so a lot of people are holding back. But assuming we can come out of this on we'll say just middle of the projections, right? Or maybe even right on projection, where in a few months they start releasing some of the social distancing recommendations or easing off of them a little bit. Then you're right. I think businesses are going to say, okay, well, we're ready to go ahead and finish that project. Well, you don't want to then be starting that relationship back over again, right? You want to have been having conversations with them, checking in on them, building that value proposition, right? So that when they're authorized to write the checks again, you're right there. They're the first person you call, and there's minimal wait time, I guess,
Yeah, top
saying
of
it
mind. That's like the
when
whole
you're
concept.
ready to go and the sign. So top of mind. That's our business. Yep.
That's right.
Well, David, I feel like you and I could talk for a long time about this stuff. I want to be sensitive of your time. How can people learn more about Big Pixel and about David Baxter?
So thebigpixel.net is our website. We just redid it a couple of months ago, so we're pretty proud of it. You can reach me at david@thebigpixel.net. That's easy. I'm also on LinkedIn. That should be pretty easy to find. But yeah, I mean, we're out there. We don't do a whole lot of social media and stuff like that, but we're out there and we're trying to take care of people as best we can.
Awesome. And folks, if you're watching and you want to get in touch with David, I'll make sure the links, as always, are in the comments or in the channel or the video description. If you're watching this later on YouTube, and if you're listening on the podcast, it'll be in the show notes. So, David, I really appreciate your time today. This, I think, has been a really, really both tactical and kind of 30,000 foot view, I guess, approach, or how one could approach this weird shutdown we're living in and keep their business moving forward. So I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about
Absolutely.
this.
It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, David, thanks again. Guys, if you're watching, make sure to tell others about our interview series. I'm really excited about it. We've had great conversations like this, and we're going to continue to do so. So please share the group, share this with a colleague or a friend who may get some benefit from it. And let me know what you think about the show. I'm always trying to make things better. So thanks again, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.